but love, happiness. Now listen to your mama tell you what she wants to give you a troubled mind. Working on her baby just as hard as she can. You got to leave the lady behind.
Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773's Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Coming on Power Talk, please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. Can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And Kat, that I had a chance to talk to last week, I'm still smiling ear to ear from it. He had a ball too, so we decided to do it again. David Lindley, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you very much, Jake. Glad to be here.
Yeah, brother. Could you just talk in general about Zabriskie Point, that soundtrack, and how Kaleidoscope was brought into that? Because it's a totally psychedelic. I just wasn't sure how you guys connected with that.
Well, it was Antonioni. Michelangelo Antonioni wanted to get a bunch of different bands to do the soundtrack. A lot of people. I forget exactly who I think the Dead did some stuff. And,
they certainly did. So did, I believe, I think maybe the Youngblood, Jesse Collin. I'll look it up. But yeah, the Dead were involved, yeah. Yeah.
So I haven't heard that in a long time, and I think that's Jeff Kaplan singing.
I mean, it's called, and then you do another tune called Mickey's Tune. I was like, what is going? I mean, it was just, but I mean, it didn't really fall on your radar. It just was something that you guys, it happened down in Southern California.
Oh yeah. It was he really was. He liked the band very much, and I'm actually not too sure how the deal came about. I think it was a record company thing. It may have been, because it was Electro Asylum. Electro Asylum has some really good people working there. Whichever version of the people that we dealt with, they were all cool. I mean, all of them. So it was lucky, except one guy.
There's always one. No, but I mean, you said last time, you said the guys that, I think it's cool to know that at one time that there weren't, if the bean counters were present, they were hipper and they really understood you guys, like, and
yeah.
I mean, they appreciated Kaleidoscope. They appreciated where you guys were coming from, and
yeah,
that's the only way the music was even ever pressed.
Yeah. The Kaleidoscope thing with Epic Records was it was originally Stu Phillips, who was a big fan because we played all this weird stuff. We went over that.
Yeah, no, you were. This is. I just want to cut to the chase. You were. I really I was thinking about this last night. I said, I have to believe Lindley must have dabbled with the sarod or sitar. Did you play the sitar?
No, I didn't. In fact, I stayed away from it.
Now, but you loved Ravi, so how did you incorporate that into your other string instruments?
Oh, I was a fan of classical Indian music from my dad's record collection. He had Udi Shankar, and he had
Ali Akbar Khan.
So, no, it was kind of, that came a little bit later. But I mean, this is when I was really young. So he was the first person that I ever saw go out and buy classical Indian music. Ravi Shankar's first album on World Pacific, and it had a kind of a red kind of starburst, sunburst kind of thing on the cover, and it was Ravi Shankar and Chatur Lal, and they and it was, during the time when I was listening to everything, and that my dad was very hip. He bought all kinds of stuff, and and he'd have it around. He loved it himself. I mean, he would listen to stuff that was, really pretty serious.
How were his ears so wide open? I mean, that's striking to me that he was not.
Yeah, I don't really know. It was built in. He was
He
always.
just dug it. Yeah, I dig.
Yeah, he was a corporation lawyer, but he was.
Go
he
figure.
played the
Yeah.
he played the piano. I mean, he worked for 20th Century Fox and National General Corporation, all the stuff, contract law, and all. And he was, and he loved different kinds of music from all over the world. The first bouzouki playing I ever heard was a soundtrack thing that he got for some film, and I forget what it was. He was a big fan of this film because of the music in it, and it was Rebettica, traditional Greek music, and
Wow.
and that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, and I had never heard that. So what is that? He says, well, it's kind of a mandolin with a long neck, and there was a picture of it, and I went, oh, one of those. Okay. So that the wheel started turning, and it was, and there's some great players in those days too. So, I heard all kinds of things, and I went into playing different kinds of folk music, having heard a lot of other things too. So playing bluegrass, I was I was listening to Earl Scruggs and Don Reno and all these guys. I had also been listening to Sabicas, the flamenco guitarist, and listening to.
There's one cat. There's one cat that I had a chance to interview this drummer Spider Webb. He played a lot with Harry Belafonte for a period of time, and with Chuck Rainey got him the gig, and it was like it was like a small United Nations at the time. It was Miriam Makeba, you had Spider and Chuck, Harry Belafonte, and then this, and I'm praying that you saw him live, was Saivuka. Did you ever see Saivuka?
Saivuka.
He had a almost like a midget-looking character, long, flowing white beard, played a myriad of instruments, played with Belafonte, did a bunch of albums on his own. But I know, not flamenco style by any means, Brazilian style. And he used to sing and play the accordion. But maybe.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah, no, I gotta hip you to this guy because this is.
Yeah.
He's like Lindley before Lindley. I mean, this guy could just perform on the stand. But going back to the Indian music with the scales and the lack of notation. I mean, was it an easy transition for you? Did you have any real academic training, or was all your learning on the bandstand? And how did you incorporate some of that timeless, that raga, those scales into the Western concept?
Well, what I would do is I would listen to everything, and if you listen to stuff long enough, you learn it. And there's one particular oud tune that I would play in the car all the time, and I would just play it over and over and over again. And I learned it from beginning to end. I sat down and played it from beginning to end. I went, oh, wow, that's a good process to have. So I figured, everything I've ever heard, the parts that I like, they're in my brain now. I mean, I've heard, that's why I have to turn off in between, if I'm watching like CNN or MSNBC and there's music and stuff in between, I have to turn it off because it goes into my brain and
Wow.
It's like, it's a small world after all. Disneyland,
Wait a minute, but what kind of condition, what is that? What were you, what is it, it's not autodidactic. What is it? I mean, how do you?
It's a subliminal, it's a subliminal thing.
Lucky bastard you are.
Yeah. Well, it turns out that there's people who've done studies on this, and that, there's the intellectual part of it, which is the one that can categorize it and organize it and write it down and do all that kind of stuff. And then there's the other part of it, which is the intuitional part of it. And the intuitional is a lot more complicated than we kind of think it is, you know. And one of the components of it is that hearing something again and again, you know, it's like it'll go in there. Now, my brother Patrick, who's a keyboard player, Patrick
Lindley
used to know all the TV theme music, and he could sing it, you know, and he could sing all the words. He'd do all the stuff, but the choruses to a lot of these things, you know, he knew the entire bonanza, all the words, the whole thing, the chorus, all, you know, all the stuff. And what he would do as an exercise is he would go back, search back through his memory into his childhood and see if he could remember the words and the music to a lot of the music that was on television. And it was when, you know, and I was around him a lot, so, and he's the kind of person that would sit around and try to move the toe that's next to the little toe by concentrating on it. That's the kind of search he could do into his brain and into his nervous system and all that. So I'm exposed to this. So I'm thinking about it. Oh man, there's something here. This is a big thing. How do you get these concert violinists, these concert pianists, to do these incredibly difficult, you know, Tchaikovsky piano concertos, you know, and Bach and all this? I mean, how do they do it? They learn it, you know. They play it over and over again, you know, and then they go out on stage and they play, you know, 5 or 6 of these things, and it's just, you know. How does that happen? Well, you know, there are circuits, there's circuitry in there that you can activate, and some of it is self-activating. If you get into a certain situation, all of a sudden you have 5 or 6 circuits that have self-activated, cataloging some things, and then kind of, you know, discarding certain parts. Oh no, that's good. We'll keep that. It's like there's a Greek chorus in your head. I think.
No, I mean, what kind of music? I don't watch. We actually caught our cable, but I mean, I stream. So maybe that's why I'm not listening to the music. But when is there musical excerpts on either of those political talk stations or TV stations? And how do you know that they're coming?
Commercial.
Just talking about commercials, really. I mean, you're just talking about...
the music for commercials and stuff, and a lot of it is frantic.
Oh,
and a lot of it is lose control music.
That's right.
Lose control and pull out that credit card kind of thing. Get online and
yeah, right.
You know,
numb your pain with materialism. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're pretty well trained, you know, and it's a whole economy that's based on this kind of thing, and you know, they've gone so far as to figure out, you know, people starting out a corporation, right? In the beginning, they said, well, what is an addictive product, and how can we improve the addiction properties of this particular thing? They do that. They have you know, rooms full of people that concentrate on doing that. How do we make it more addictive? So we're dealing with that all the time, and I say, well, that's probably one of those addicticorp, you know,
right?
A addicticorp kind of product there. That's product right there. So I say I don't want any part of that. I don't have time for it. Too old, don't have time for it. And then, you know, and besides, I have to keep a train of thought, you know, like everybody has to be able to do that kind of thing, and especially now, it's like warfare. It's a martial art. That's what it is.
Well, I mean, it's also about how much do you want to. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this stuff, but it's like how much you know, are you going to invest in, certain things that, I don't know, mass shootings. I mean, how much are you going to attach yourself to the emotions of the people that are affected, or are you going to go out and use your true nature to cultivate love, or do stuff in order to create harmony in your universe? Somehow along the way, you guys have stimulated me to create something out of nothing, as opposed to getting absorbed or trained, I guess is the right word. I've become untrained, and but in all facets of my life. So it's been relatively invigorating. I want you to. We have. I just listened to this clip. Now you're going to know who this is because he's an old buddy of yours. You spilled Coke on his drum set, but this is Keltner talking about John Densmore. I want you to listen to what he's talking about, and you can relate it to your own studio career. So take a listen to this.
Okay.
Finish it off real quick.
Sure.
The thing is that I asked Bruce, because he was engineering the stuff that I was doing. I was doing all kind of other dates and things. So I said to Bruce one time, "Hey man, why can't you get my drums to sound like John's? On on those great Doors songs I'm hearing on the radio all the time." And he laughed and he said, "John is always telling me, why can't you get my tom-toms to sound like Kelton?" So I loved what that told me. It taught me a whole lot right then, especially about engineering, And another good thing, and I'll just say this, it's not going to be important to anybody else but drummers. There might be a few drummers listening. The thing about John Densmore's sound with the Doors back then, I can't speak for now, but the sound back then, the magic of it was that he had a really terrible drum set, apparently, and tuned really poorly as compared to the way you're supposed to tune your drums as a studio player.
Okay, so I literally listened. Okay, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so I want to talk to Lindley. You do hunt out cheap material is that true? I mean, can you talk about this idea of not the highest quality instrument, not the way it's supposed to be?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, tell me about Lindley in the studio, because with Densmore, I don't listen to the Doors that much, really. I mean, I like John. I don't listen to it, so I'm not necessarily I haven't listened to his sound, but I trust Keltner well enough. And then for Keltner to say, I learned a lot about engineering, and he knew he had to extrapolate on it, so he talks about Densmore having almost a childlike situation where it was not traditional tuning or even quality. And so I'm like, Lindley was doing this totally as well. So I was hoping you could talk about an example or two when you did that.
There was there was a point at which I started liking stuff that was kind of trashy sounding, like ska, the original ska music.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
And you get and then in early reggae, there were guitar sounds that were really odd. There was the polished, funky polished stuff, and then there was other stuff that was kind of bad sounding. And I started doing research on things, and I would look at photographs and say, well, what kind of guitar did J.B. Hutto play? J.B. Hutto on the Screaming Nighthawks. That alone would make you want to go find out what's going on with that. So I would see these guitars and go, okay, these are cheaper guitars. These are not, these guys can't really afford a lot. So they get these guitars, and they have this sound. Cooter did kind of the same thing. So, you find these guitars that have this other sound. And it doesn't sound like a Stratocaster, it doesn't sound like a Les Paul, doesn't sound like, anything else. It's got this other sound, cheap pickups.
Interesting. This is so it has another, it is a non-commercial factory sound.
Yeah, it's more like or a minor factory, minor guitar manufacturers. Like,
right, I dig.
Harmony was kind of not Gibson, not Fender, and all that stuff, but they had electric guitars that were just fabulous sounding. A lot of the blues players, they would play that. You couldn't get this, then you got one of these. This is as good or better sounding, And then of course Dan Electro came along, and that's the Volkswagen of electric guitars. So, and you could get in the case it was an amp too. So you had this guitar in the amp case, and it was a nice practice amp and a good sound, nice circuitry, tubes and everything sounding really good. So you had this amazing instrument. One of the things about a Dan Electro, as opposed to a harmony or a K or something like that, some of those harmonies and Ks were difficult to play. They weren't the best. They had baseball bat necks and all that stuff. Dan Electro wasn't like that, because the main consultant for Dan Electro guitars was John D'Angelico, one of the greatest guitar makers ever lived. So he was a friend of Nate Daniel, and he would go and I've probably gone over this before, but anyway.
No, you have not.
No, the radius for the fingerboard was a D'Angelico radius. You have this $10,000 guitar, this exact same radius as on this $129.95 guitar, same thing. And there were some principles about to have stuff sound good that they just hit on. They experimented and they got it right. And then, let's tweak this a little bit. No, you don't want to put those pots in there, because those pots, that like Fender, no, they don't really go with the pickup. So we'll go with this other thing. So, and you go in there and you look at the components and stuff, and you see that it's wrapped in copper foil, okay, to cut the hum down. Okay, and the copper foil is then attached to the grounding part of the circuit, so they don't hum. And they have this, and their pickup is entirely covered by what looks like a lipstick tube, chrome, brass, whatever it was, and so you get this great sounding guitar, almost foolproof, that played really easily, and was ultimately adjustable for the action, for everything. So here are these fabulous guitars, and same with the Taiskos, the Japanese guitars. They were really well made too, and you could play them, very playable, wonderful kind of things. And it turns out that there's some players in Japan who started this kind of movement, and it's like it's kind of reggae. But it's based on Japanese and Chinese and Indonesian, Okinawan music.
Wow.
Different kind of thing.
Wow.
They called it chunk. Okay.
What years exactly did this start?
This is in I think it's in the 70s.
Woo,
the 70s and the
fierce.
80s. Well, these guys were doing this. There's a guy named Makoto Kubota. Harry Hosono, Shokichi Kina, who was Okinawan. And these guys put this stuff together. It was like a mixture of traditional Okinawan Japanese music and then a little bit of New Orleans thrown in. Okay, here's this stuff, and the number one guitar player was this guy named Kenny Inoue. And Kenny Inoue played a Taisko. He played one of those 3 pickup Taiskos with a handle in the side of the body. You could pick up the guitar body because it had a handle in it, cut out there and put your hand in there. You lift it up, and it's great. Really awful color schemes on some of these things. Horrible. I mean, it was like, okay, it had a brown body, okay, the color of Gerber's liver soup, and then you had this industrial gray anodized pickguard, and you look at it and you go, that's really horrible unless you know something about Japanese culture, and then you go, oh, wait a minute. Oh, this is that thing. Okay. Oh, okay, I see. An aluminum pickguard, and the pickups attached to the aluminum pickguard with springs. so that the aluminum pickguard, you hear the sound of the aluminum pickguard in the sound of the pickups. And they're microphonic pickups, and they get and all this stuff. You put it together, and you get this wonderful sound that you don't have to, it doesn't distort all that well. But if you want to play it like a regular guitar sound, non-distorted, they were the best because they were so complex sounding, and it was interesting just to hear the thing, and then all these techniques Kenny would do, and at the same time there was another musical style called Kwachi Ando. Kwachi Ando music was music of the right-wing party and of the Yakuza, was the Japanese gangsters. This was a traditional music based on traditional Japanese country music, and it was scalding, man. This stuff was so nasty,
Jeez.
so funky, and
Was there any percussion instruments, or was it all just?
Oh yeah, of course.
Oh,
yeah, there's percussion, and then bad keyboards. You want your bad keyboards, you put it on your string stuff.
This is so this is unbelievable. So this was a craze. How did you get? And you got wrapped up in this.
I met a lot of these guys. Makoto Kubota is a good friend of mine.
Wow.
And Shukichi Kina is a good friend of mine. And he ended up in the Japanese parliament representing Okinawa. So he's like this Okinawan national treasure kind of guy who lived on an island with monkeys for 2 years.
Well, this is my kind of guy, man.
Yeah. Kina's the best, man. And you hear his band. You hear this stuff, Shukichi Kina and the Champions, and it will make you jump up and down and drink a lot of Okinawan sake.
Cold, preferably cold, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And way more alcohol. You will do that. The Okinawan, when the music gets really good, when it gets into that deep blue Okinawan blues stuff, the audience lies down on their back on the floor. That's the way that you're supposed to respond to it. If it's really, really, really good, the audience lies down on their back. And when you hear that stuff, when you hear the traditional Okinawan music, like Kina's uncle, you hear that stuff with Sanchin, like a Shamsin kind of thing, but Okinawan thing. You hear this stuff, and the drums, and the steel castanets, and all this stuff's the deepest blues. It's as deep as the Arabic stuff. Just amazing. So there's this other world. In fact, there's a whole bunch of these different things, and I went looking for all this stuff. Cooter did the same thing. Went looking for this. Lowell George went looking for it because he recognized it. Oh, yeah, well, how about an entire world of classical Indian music that people haven't really heard? Wow. What's this instrument? Oh, that's an S-Raj. A what? An S-Raj. Yeah, you could play it like this, and then it's all these different instruments, and they're all interesting. And what happened? It became a certain kind of feeling. It became a certain thing. When you heard a certain thing that set off a trigger in your brain, you knew it. It was there. It was obvious as anything. It's like you smell garlic or something. There it is, and it sets off your appetite. So I would hear a certain kind of music and a certain rhythmic kind of thing, and it would set off these. Got to eat that. I'm gonna eat that.
Yeah, I mean it's delicious. Cooter,
oh, yeah.
Cooter, Lowell, yourself, and there was another cat that popped into my. I can't remember now. Where would you go finding these instruments?
Oh, there were a lot of places. McCabe's every once in a while would have them, and then you found the Mid-East imports. they would have them, and then you went and you toured these countries, toured Japan, and then you run into people like Ashura Ito, Benimaru, who was an artist who had a lot to do with Pokemon and stuff, and Ashura was always looking for instruments. This guy could find all kinds of things. Hiroshi Asada also. Hiroshi was the guy who found me the original Taisco Hawaiian guitar and the original Taisco amp, which looked like a radio and had a beautiful traditional Japanese iron handle on it. It was an amp.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Guitar amp.
That's
I still have this. So these guys, they recognized that, and in fact, it was Hiroshi Asada who turned me on to Kina's uncle. It turned me on to the traditional Okinawan music, which is kind of like reggae anyway. And then there's you sing these songs and these soulful voices. You hear this and you go, this is wow. And then you hear the electric guitar version and the that kind of thing with the keyboards and all. Then you hear that version of that music, and they kept the essence of it, which is the real important thing that you have to keep. You have to know what the essence is to begin with, and then you keep that in there too. No matter what instruments it is, you still have that garlic in there. It's still there.
You're cooking the groove. No, I mean this is it's so great because you went off on that massive Okinawa tangent, which was mind blowing.
Oh yeah.
But what didn't necessarily come through in that audio clip with Keltner is that the engineer was Bruce Botnick. And
yeah, I know Bruce.
Yeah, I figured you did. I don't know him, but Keltner said for some coincidence, a lot of dates he was doing, Botnick was engineering, and Botnick was also the engineer for the Doors. And what Keltner was really saying was, it taught me a lot about engineering, because if you bring a drum kit in and it's perfectly tuned and it sounds great, then what job does the engineer have? You're basically letting him off the hook. Where with Densmore, when you brought in the Rinky Dink set, he had to make that come to life. So that's what he would. So I'm curious, like, was there one of these ethnic, instruments, international instruments that where you could talk about how an engineer, either with yourself or with somebody else in the studio, where they really showed their chops because it wasn't tuned studio sound wise. It wasn't tuned to that kind of.
I see what you mean. Yeah. What you have to do when you went into the studio to record stuff, you had your sound, and I would have like my Dan Electro 6-string bass or Dan Electro baritone guitar, and I'd put it through this one amp, a Standell amp, and then but first I'd run it through a CE1 Roland chorus or a CE2 Roland chorus.
Wow.
And you go and you hear this sound, and it's so good, it's on its own, that an engineer and I used to work with Greg Ladani a lot, and Ladani would come in and he'd go, oh, okay. Oh, I see what you're doing. Okay, and then his stuff would kick in. Okay, you want to turn it down just a little bit, because I'm going to use this microphone that's super sensitive. You don't want to overdrive the microphone and have it go blat in there and bottom out. You don't want that. You don't want to overdrive it. So turn it down just a little bit. I said, well, it's not getting the same sound. Oh, yeah, it is. It sounds exactly the same in the control room. And I go in and I hear what he would record on this take, and it did. It sounded exactly like it was. So you get these engineers who would come out, they'd listen to what you were doing, and they would place the microphones. There's some people that would make the sound, good sound, bad sound, or whatever sound they're going for, they do it with the microphone placement. And it's a whole other world. It's another thing other than just putting a microphone in the traditional place and close miking it or whatever it is, and then doing it all electronically. Well, Ladani would do it by putting the mic in a certain place, or he'd make it so that it didn't point exactly at the speaker. It was slightly off axis. so the sound waves weren't hitting the diaphragm direct on. They were kind of glancing off it. Better sound, okay, because then you also pick up the floor. The sound coming off the floor, whether it has a carpet on there or not, or whatever it is. Ladani and that, there's a whole bunch of engineers, especially in L.A., that would do that kind of stuff, and those are the people you wanted to work with. Botnick was one of them. George Massenburg, Greg Ladani, Val Garay, Nico Bolas, Ed Cherney, and these guys, they knew what they were doing. They really knew what they were doing, and
I mean, out of any of, I mean, clearly they had monster skill sets, but was it? I talked to Cooch about this a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and he said, like, I just almost have even though I'm 39 and in theory it's my generation's music, I just have this almost like knee-jerk reaction to hearing stuff that was not recorded post 1975, basically. And I don't know what and Cooch was like, has nothing to do with analog versus digital. It is how you mic the room. It's how you, and so was it their miking that was genius? Was it their understanding of dynamics? Or here's the other point, is that, and this is what I want to talk to you about too, is that imperfection is okay. Like inflection, or like you said, the bouncing off of the diaphragm. I mean, David Spinoza flubbed his solo on Right Place, Wrong Time with the meter, with Dr. John. They left it in. So what combination of imperfection, dynamics, and miking, how can you break that down as to the keys as opposed to it's not analog versus digital? Yeah,
it's a chain of command. Okay, the first thing in the chain of command is what you bring into the studio. Okay. The second thing is the microphone you choose. Okay. Third thing is where you put that microphone. Okay.
Wow.
And what you run it through. What kind of preamp do you run it through? You know, a tube preamp. You know, an old Pultec, or you have RCA. You know, one of those things that has its own sound. And a lot of engineers developed certain combinations of microphone, mic preamp, and then it goes into a board. Okay, the board, the old ones that people used to use, the old APIs, the old Neve boards, Trident was wonderful. A lot of the stuff, there was a combination of things. You put this together, you put that together, and then you run it like that. You run this at 1030. Okay, that's that Boulder preamp. There's one setting on there. It's perfect for a guitar right there. 1030. Stop. Take your hand away from that. Step back from the console. Okay, here we go. People developed these things that worked, and then they would do variations on them. And it's all genius stuff. You know, these guys, they were so into it. You know, that they were junkie-like thing. You know, and they knew exactly what it's, because when it sounded really good, there's nothing in the world like hearing what you've just done, the combination of all these variables, and you hear it coming out of the speaker, and it just, you know, has the smell. So, yeah, and there is and this, you change one thing, especially you know, early on, you change one thing, and it changes everything. So what you bring into the studio, it's got to sound good on its own. Even if you put like a, you know, Shure 58 up to have it sound good, you know, and it'll sound good with anything. It'll sound good live. It'll sound good, and then you put good microphones on it, and then, you know, and when I went a step further, I bought the microphones that sound good. I said, what is that, Greg? Greg, stop for a minute. Stop for a minute. What is that microphone there? That's a little silver microphone. He says, oh, that's a KM54. but it's a KM54A. It's silver. It's not the other. This is a gray. This is a KM54. It's gray. Neumann KM54. So I said, "Oh, do you know anybody who has one of those?" He says, "Oh yeah, call this guy." So I got to know these guys. Dan Alexander was the main guy, and these guys have all these microphones. They sell them all the time, and you know, they get them in all the time. And then I got to know the people who repaired stuff. I got to know Stephen Paul, who was making his own microphone capsules, and he revolutionized a lot of the old microphones and made a lot of them better. And some of them he just made different, but he'd hot rod them, he'd upgrade them, he'd change things around. He'd say, "Oh, this is a Neumann 87. Okay, you have a choke on that microphone. You want to listen to what happens when you take the choke out." And I listened to these things, and it was huge sounding. So why did they put that in there? Oh well, I don't know. It's like a limiter, a compressor limiter, or some kind of thing, so that they can use it from a distance. All that stuff. So hanging out with these guys was a big part of it, because if you understood, the more you understood about this, why this sounds good, the better it is, because then you go into it. You know why, and so you know that you can play this certain kind of thing, and it'll pick it up. The point will get across because you have engineered it so that the sound is good, and always working with the engineers that knew how to do all that stuff. That's the A team. There were other guys too that were really good in their own way. They did a different kind of thing, but we kind of went for the same thing: big and huge and fabulous, golden sound with you know, sparkle, high end, and you know, really wonderful stuff. And you know, and where it sits in the mix, and oh no, you don't want that much dynamic stuff. You don't want the whole sound range on that one microphone, because it's going to eat everything else on the track up. Ooh.
Yeah, see, I mean,
really?
you're nailing this, because, well, I mean, when I interviewed Val Garay, he said with singers now, I mean, there's no dynamic range at all. I mean, so dynamics have really disappeared, and then if you can't even hear that, then you're not going to know what sound. I mean, you don't even hear that kind of stuff. To me, it was.
Oh yeah.
And there's also this thing, I guess, about this obsession about perfection, about getting spending 45 minutes on getting a drum sound. I mean, when you were in the studio with just take Crosby Nash or you, I mean, in the live context, did you guys what was your concept of the R word rehearsing? What was that like? I mean, would you want to rehearse that much, or did you kind of just let it go? You knew the stuff and you wanted it to be fresh.
There was a lot of approaches, a lot of different ways of doing it. One of the reasons that a lot of that budgets got cooked is because people would experiment and learn the song in the studio during studio time, you know,
right?
That kind of thing. Yeah, that would cook the budget kind of bad, but it also made it so that you could capitalize on this thing that you just found by accident. Okay, this is out of phase. Okay, here, listen to it out of phase. Now here it's in phase. Let's keep it out of phase. Okay. And that was the key to having the great Gorky guitar sound.
Oh, I love it.
You know, and so you kept that, and it was working with the tools on the sculpture, you know, in real time, and then you had, you know, people helping you and doing all that. So sometimes some people would like to have it exactly the they hear it in their head, and they would go for that. And you had to, your gig was to get exactly the sound that they had in their head. So, and that was one of the things about being a studio musician in that period, is that you had to know what they were thinking of, what they liked, and how to get that sound. And if you're going to introduce some different stuff in there, that they would like that too. and you kind of know because you've been working with this person a lot, and they would I know they'll like this. I know they'll like this, and maybe you're wrong sometimes, and then, but people would get obsessed by hearing the thing in their head, what it should really sound like. I do that now too. I want it to sound like I envision it, and if it's different, if it's not what I envision, then it better be really good.
Did you?
Or better.
Well, I mean, I was curious about if you could talk. One of the cats who I loved hanging with, and I was wondering, was the first time you played with Russ Kunkel with Crosby Nash, or did you cross paths with him in the studio?
I'd seen Russ in different bands, and I'd heard him all along for a long time. We kind of go way back.
Can you talk about Kunkel? Because I just love, he just cringes, but I just love digging deep on that cat because, I mean, he had such a unique style. And I'm like, I think Lindley and Kunkel probably go way back. So please break that down. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, he was. Originally, I'm not exactly sure where he came from originally, but he was kind of always there. He was the drummer, the really good drummer you wanted to play with, and steady and listened and really receptive and a great sound and a good guy to hang out with. So you had that, and he would end up on a lot of things that I did. He ended up on a lot of Jackson's things and Crosby and Nash and it was a real pleasure to play with Russ because you felt you could breathe. You're not holding your breath when you're playing with Russ. You can relax and all the good ideas come out. And it's so important. A drummer that is not distracting.
Meaning that he wasn't
His time was really, really good.
Right, and he wasn't talking too much. There wasn't a lot of additional language on the trap set per se.
No, that doesn't matter because I played with drummers who talked a lot.
Right, but
Paul Lago.
Oh, Lago, dude, you and Lagos. I mean, dude, I found this picture.
Oh man.
Oh my! I mean, dude, the dude was all over. But I mean, I'm still trying to get a Kunkel there. Would you say that's the other part? Is that Jackson? When I really think about it now, you were kind of in the part of the section, quote unquote, with with Sklar or Tim Drummond and Kunkel and Cooch and Durgy and those guys, but how much of it was they formed during those years with Jackson, those early records that was the rhythm section there. How much of it was the leader? What is Jackson Browne's legacy that never gets talked about? Everybody knows him for his tunes. But what is it about those guys grew up under him, and the next thing you know, they were essentially, you'd already been in the band, doing Balkan and R&B soul, you were doing Straight No Chaser, which I still need to hear. But, I mean, those. Can you talk about the intangibles that Jackson brought, especially if he was somebody who cultivated and saw and understood real talent?
Oh yeah, he knew exactly what he was doing, and he had that vision in his head, sound vision thing that he would go for. He said, "I want He'd have certain things that he would like, and that didn't distract from the songs themselves, and we would do our best to make sure that it happened, and that's the part of all the studio stuff where the song was the central part of it. It wasn't selling records. It wasn't doing this. Wasn't doing that. You just wanted to fortify the song and fortify the vision by what you played. And it's not an ego thing.
No, none. I mean, none of you guys.
No.
This is so like, Amo Richards and Ron Tutt and David Lindley. I mean, I want to just really just get this on the record. Like, those cats would be essentially, well, like you, jingles, soundtracks, record dates, all day in Burbank. Like Ernie Watts, right? He was a doubler, right? He could play. So he'd be playing flute and multiple saxes. But the point is, you were making dough in the studio, right? So you didn't need at night. Where were you? Because I know those cats would go out. Amo would go to Dante's, or later on it was the Baked Potato. They would play for free. They didn't need the dough, right? They were cleaning up in the studios. So I'm like, where did Lindley go to blow off steam? You mentioned the Ice House. But I'm also like, where did Lindley go to? Were you going? I'm not saying you went to Dante's and were playing jazz with John Guerin,
No.
But I'm saying where were you going to blow off steam after a full day in the studio, especially if you came in before the sun came up and left after the sun went down?
Yeah, I'd go home and play.
You never went. You didn't have like this band that you like the Baked, because I mean Joni Mitchell discovered the LA Express at the Baked Potato, for instance, with Joe Sample, but you didn't go out and play live for free, because those cats were taking all the jobs. They didn't need money.
Yeah, I know. John Bilazikian was a great friend of mine. He was a friend of Tommy Tedesco.
Mm-hmm.
And John would play all the Mission Impossible stuff, and he would play all these things where it needed oud, and he was also a great violinist.
Is he still with us?
No, he's not.
Oh my, dude! I cannot believe you just dropped that cat's name. He was the most ridiculous oud player ever.
It's fabulous.
Oh my God.
Fabulous oud player. He was the cat. So you have, and it's Tommy Tedesco, who took John under his wing and said, "Here, I'll show you. I'll show you what to do." So he got John into doing all these different things, and Tommy was. I would run into him every once in a while. He was the guy. Dennis Budimir.
Yeah, my man. I've interviewed Dennis, and then what was the cat's name? Julius Wechter and
Mike Deasy.
Mike Deasy. Were you? So you were on? You knew? I mean, is it fair to say that Lindley was a tangential original Wrecking Crew member, or were you not in the studio at that point?
No, I wasn't. I would every once in a while, be asked to come in and play 5-string banjo on things, and there was a session with this guy Randy Boone, who had a kind of minor hit TV show, and the people that he asked to come in and play on this, and it was about Appalachian stuff, country kid and all this, and the people that were in there playing, it was Glenn Campbell on 12-string guitar, and it was James Burton on dobro.
Wow.
Which was a wooden top guitar. It wasn't a dobro. It was like a Hawaiian guitar, but he played this harmony guitar, wonderful sound, and then it was me on 5-string, and so we'd go in there and play. And I got to know Randy pretty well. Very cool guy, and it was real, and it was Glenn Campbell, he had just had that 12-string album.
Right.
He was a session guy, and he very cool and really articulate. And let's try this. Let's try it this way, and wonderful guy. So.
But did you know Kunkel at that point too, or
yeah, he was around. He was. I think he played in some Linda Ronstadt's early stuff.
He was in a band too. I can never remember the name, but like Sklar was in a band called Wolfgang that was named after Bill Graham. But then Kunkel was in a band. But I'm just trying. I mean, I'm just trying to dig up these.
Yeah.
Roots.
I know what you mean. I don't remember.
Well, let's just settle. I mean, Lindley's been cooking here. Let's just settle in. I got a piece of music. I can't stop listening to it. Let's see if you can peg it, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Okay.
Was the one that. Brought to you by the Jewish Community Center of Southern Arizona, the Jewish Federation of Southern Arizona, Craig Pretzinger of Allstate Insurance, Abbott Taylor Jewelers, and Arzak Wagner Jewelers, and we thank them for their support So we can play tunes like that for the man David Lindley. What do you got for us, man? What do you think that is?
That's who I think is the greatest voice in rock and roll, Terry Reid.
I couldn't agree. I mean,
Yeah.
mind fuck. Excuse my language. I mean, mind blowing. Mind blowing.
Absolutely. He was he would do stuff, you know, totally off the top of his head, and he'd get into the stuff, and that's him playing rhythm guitar. He could play that kind of guitar and sing at the same time.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. That was a tune named Dean off Terry Reid album called River,
Yes.
which was pressed on Atlantic. But I got to tell you, man, I mean, and I think you're going to be able to fill in the blanks, but these are British cats on in the rhythm section. Lee Miles and Conrad Isador. I mean, I don't recognize those cats at all.
You said, Conrad? Yeah, Conrad is from the island of Dominica.
Okay, and then just for the record, for the audience out there who was listening to all that wild sonic expanding string work, that Lindley guitar, electric guitar, steel guitar, slide guitar, and somewhere else on the album, violin as well. But it's just, and I'll tell you, listen, there's two things that stand out to me, and then you can fill in the blanks. One, I'm going to make this call, and I'm going to put it out to the public later. I don't know if you know that Grateful Dead tune, "Fire on the Mountain," but this they lifted that tune from this song, because they didn't write that tune until the late '70s, and this came out in '72. So that's number one, and number two is that. Now that I listen to it more and more, how much of a student to student, teacher to student, student to teacher, comrade relationship did you have with Lowell George? Because that sounds like Little Feat to me too. I mean, you taught Lowell some stuff too?
No, Lowell was a kind of a self-contained home entertainment unit. He was.
Yeah, right.
He was an entire nation.
Right.
Lowell George.
Right.
Yeah, and he listened to stuff and the way he wrote tunes, totally unique. You get a certain combination of musicians, and you put them in the studio. Okay, you get Conrad, who was really unusual. He played with Stephen Stills on some stuff, and he was in England at that particular time.
Right.
He wasn't British. He was from Dominica.
Dominica.
Yeah, and that's in the Caribbean.
Sure.
It's one of those islands that got screwed over by the hurricanes.
Yeah, right.
Little island. Yeah, and a great feel. And amazing stuff.
He made that song too, because the groove he was playing on that made the song. The very hard groove to work out.
You have and then you get Lee Miles, who is
that cat? I've never heard of him.
He played with Ike and Tina Turner. He was he was this kid from Watts, and he was 19 years old, and he comes over to England and plays with Terry Reid, and amazing, unbelievable techniques, fabulous bass player, and just locked in. And and you get Conrad playing that, and Lee Miles on that, and then Terry doing that kind of chicken picking, almost kind of.
Chicken picking is he's like,
almost. Yeah, there's some stuff on YouTube of him and Lee Miles and Soko Richardson, who was a fabulous drummer too.
Wow.
And as a trio, and they're rehearsing at Alley, and they get into this thing that makes you try to find the cortisone cream, make you itch so bad. Reid
would go into a high octave just on the fly, like he wouldn't. There was no chord.
Oh yeah.
Would he bring chord charts, or was it just like no chord?
Off the top of his head, there was a basic structure for the song, and then in between there, and you'd have to watch him for signals and stuff like that, because he'd go off on tangents every once in a while. You got to go with him.
So this was like not. I'm fascinated with nonverbal communication in the studio. But so he would like, what would he just sort of give you a head nod or wave the arm or what? I mean, how would he communicate? Eyebrow.
He give you the eyebrow.
The brow.
Okay. Yeah, the brow. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. The ever-present brow.
The brow, man. So no
right.
I mean, this album in particular,
Oh,
there was no. You're telling me that there were no arrangements and no chord charts.
There we all knew the song.
Right. Okay, so you'd been
we went in there knowing the songs. We've been playing them live for a long time.
I see.
And stuff. So, and we've been doing different versions of them, and you know, and it was one of those things that was a long time coming. But Terry was he would go places, you know, at the last minute, or he would change things around a little bit, and he'd change the words. And he'd it was almost like calypso, kind of the way he would change words and you know, add verses and do things like that. But he's very, very organized in a kind of free-form way.
You are, but that's kind of you too, though, right? I mean, you kind of locked in on that, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that rubbed off, and a lot of the stuff I got from the Kaleidoscope, and doing that, you know, free-form stuff, and in those days, in the 60s, it was, you know, that was the thing you did. And so taking the stuff from the 60s and then brought it into, you know, playing with Terry in England, which was for 3 years. And there was the first version of Terry's band was Bruce Rowlands, the drummer from the Grease Band.
Mm-hmm.
And a bass player from Belfast named Chrissy Stewart. And then me and Terry.
I know that name.
Yeah, he was with the Pretty Things.
Oh my.
Yeah.
I mean, did you said something? I just transcribed it and put it up on Facebook, and people are loving it. It was this, and it kind of just torched me a little bit. And let me see if I can bring it up here. But basically, the Louvin brothers. You were talking about the Beatles, and that it was okay to plug in. But the fact that the Beatles, you said they sounded like, this sounds familiar. This sounds like the Louvin brothers. And I'm like, holy crap. Everybody comes from someone else, you know? And that was just revelatory for me. But, I want you to just please, for my own sanity, you talked last time very articulately about this idea that when you had the opportunity for freeform radio and you would hear George Jones and then you'd hear Ravi and you know, whatever, you got this understanding that it really was, music was basically all the same.
Yes.
Can you go deeper on, I know you already went deep on that, but can you give like some, I guess I'm struggling because I just know that my peers would come at me and say, what are you talking about? I mean, I get what you're saying, but it's like, how do you square the circle with Return to Forever, Weather Report, and then and then compare? I mean, Kaleidoscope, okay, something like that. But I mean, how do you sync that with bubblegum music or Apple? I mean, how? I need you to go deeper on this idea that it's basically all the same.
All the same. Well.
Without repeating anything you said last. Just kidding. I mean, you were so glib last time, but it was like I just need to follow up on that.
Well, the thing is, it's notes, it's spaces, it's pitch, it's quality of tone, it's combinations of different instruments. Thinking basically, what is it? How would you describe this to a Venusian who has no ears? How would you describe this? So, well, there are pitches, they're mathematical, and they're multiples, and you put them together in a certain way so that it all works together and creates its own world. So you add another thing. It's the thing that you add to all that. And the thing that you add to it is the smell.
The smell.
The smell.
The garlic.
I heard people, William Smith, Smitty.
Oh my God, man! I never got. Wow, I can't believe you just brought him up.
Oh man, he
Freaking love that
could
guy,
He could articulate all that stuff, and he, come on, he played with Chuck Berry,
I don't think I even knew that.
Oh yeah, he played with Chuck Berry. That's when the first time I heard him. So Smitty would say, it doesn't have the smell. It says good. It's good. And you know what smell he's talking about. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. That don't smell. Doesn't smell. Okay, we got to do something to that, and so he would, it would. Tim Drummond was also used to talk about the smell too. So they said, well, that smell, I don't smell. Cooter would do that. So, yeah, that sound, that don't sound. That sounds. And there was a thing that when you put it in there, it made it really work together. It tied it all together, and it made alloys, like you're making metal.
Were not to interrupt, but were there, obviously with Cooter and those, but were there sessions when you knew it didn't have the smell, and yet, not you as a leader, but that, you guys packed it in and wrapped up the session? I mean, did everything have a smell with you, with what you were on, or did you know sometimes after, you got paid for the gig, you were just a session cat, and you're like, that didn't have the smell, but it's not my gig, so, whatever.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Of course you would do that, too, because one of the things also about that is the thing that you have a responsibility. You've been hired. You have to come up with something that they can use that's really good. It'll make the song better, and it's an obligation. You have that. You've been hired to do this, and you should come up with something really good. And when I was doing lots and lots of sessions, that's what I would try to do, and get into the, what would work with the song, and for a while it was a lot of the same thing. It was electric slide guitar or mandolin. Okay, it's one or the other, and a lot of these other instruments, they didn't get played, but somehow or other, Lindley, bring everything. Are you serious? Do you know what everything is? Yeah, bring everything. Okay, and I say okay. And I would make bets with myself. I would say, okay, Lindley, sit down, man. Check this out. Okay, this one will be the Rickenbacker. Okay, because it's an A. It'll be the Rickenbacker through the Tweed Deluxe or the Snakeskin Deluxe. One of the two turned up to 10. Okay, and then the other thing will be mandolin. Guarantee you. So I'd go to the session, and that's what it would be, and I'd have an entire truck full of stuff, Turkish saws and chumbush and Turkish banjo, and then electric fiddle and acoustic fiddle, and a bunch of different things I've been kind of experimenting around with. Maybe this will work. This is good, and he would usually that was called the mandolin slide period. And that's what they wanted, because there was somebody's tune that they really liked had that in there, and we wanted go and play really up really high. Oh, okay, I can do that. I know how to do that. So and it worked on a lot of tunes, and I would hear I was working with Dan Fogelberg and people like that. He was really adventuresome. So we'd try out a bunch of different things and stuff, and we'd end up. I said, well, you know what? Let me play this. Okay. Okay. Turn the mic on. So, and it's an electric slide, and my National Electric, and he said, yeah, that's it, that's good, okay. And so there were.
I did not mean to knock you off the track. It was this idea of the smell
No.
or the feel, the sound.
Yeah, and it's the, it's the smell. You got to have that. And that's the one component that you put into all the really bare essential aspects of what music is made of. And then it's where you play that stuff from. Okay, do you play it for the intellect, or do you play it for the butt? Okay. You play it for the heart and the butt. Okay. So you had there's I recognized that a long time ago. Why does this really choke me up? Why is this grabbing me by the throat? Because it's played in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's another smell. You can tell people when they play if they're listening to what they're playing, and you can tell if they're feeling something. And it comes out. And there's certain people that can do that kind of thing, and it's always good, even if it's real simple. It's always good. All those long notes, Lowell George's stuff, Bonnie Raitt's stuff, when she plays bottleneck guitar, and you get it gets you, grabs you by the throat and lifts you up, shakes you a little bit. So
the heart and the butt. Is that got that? I mean, you got to shake your butt, right?
He's got they're close allies.
I mean, it's very. It's so important to talk about this stuff, man, because we are so. Everything has to be branded, and everything has to be there has to be terminology given to everything, especially stuff that is not quantifiable, and that's when you can't do that. I mean, you can't do that with music. Music is unquantifiable. It's all music, and I say that, and Duke Ellington said that, but I didn't really know what it meant until I transcribed that thing where you talk about a feeling, a smell, and a sound. I mean, it's all multisensory stuff, but you have to be able to feel, and your ears have to be unlocked in order to really to hear it. And if you're lacking those sensory inputs, then you're going to wind up getting I mean, that was the thing. I mean, Rick Marotta, he broke it in. He goes, I'm listening to younger drummers play, and it sounds like a drum machine. And I look, and it's a real person, and they're playing drum machine parts. I mean, that's insane. When he said that, I said, "That's it. That's it."
I know the expression on his face as he was saying that.
Well, no, he was. You know what? He doesn't want to be deprecating or take any credit away. I mean, he doesn't want to do that. But he said that it's just become so homogenized that even the cats today, they look the same. They play the same. They look the same. I mean, it is a strange sort of, it's going to be invigorating at some point, probably well after we're gone from this earth, when, either there's a complete collapse of civilization and there's a rebirth of music, or, or you just get curious-minded people who challenge and say, well, and then they have to be gifted enough like you. I mean, you said it 5 or 6 times in the first 2 interviews where you're like, oh, I see what this is. So you have to be able to think for yourself and problem solve on your own, and you can't read everything out of a manual. And so, but to articulate that and to understand that it is really beyond any facility or technique, it really has to do with, why is it getting you choked up? Why is it affecting your heart?
Yes.
Why are you getting down? Why are you jumping in your cart? Why are you banging on the stick shift, playing the rhythm parts? Because you're just on fire. And I just want people to start burning again in that fashion. And
they are.
Good. No, I'm doing my part.
It's a different colored flame. You see.
Really? Yeah, okay, yeah. What,
yeah,
what,
it's a
interesting.
different colored flame. It's like, I mean, that's a style of music that's going on right now. I mean, people playing like a drum machine, and you know, because that's what's required. You know,
That's right.
These guys, they're doing their gigs. They're doing. It looks like they're doing it really well. You know, and I every once in a while you see on Saturday Night Live or something like that, and you see a nasty drummer. I forget what I was watching the other night, but this guy was really good, and he was in there, and it was slightly behind the beat, but steady as a rock,
Uh-huh.
and he was right in there, and he had this nasty, mean look on his face, and I said, okay, there you go, okay, that's good.
Right. Norm, and you know what? In the 60s and 70s, that cat, along with Hal Blaine, David Kemper, John Guerin,
Yeah.
Jim Gordon, Jim Keltner, on and on. There
Oh,
were 4
fuck yeah.
million dudes. There were so many peeps, and now you have these pop acts, and it's basically the same clique doing all the rhythm section stuff. That's part of the issue too, is that the accompanists were way out front. I mean, yeah, you were a leader eventually, but you know what? People look at the back of albums and say, "Wow, Lindley played." You know, that Reid album, I had that album and I foolishly foisted it on somebody else because at the time I didn't know you even were on it. I was all getting off on it because Willie Bobo played on it. And I'm like,
yeah.
you know, it's just, but it's like that anonymity is also stifling the music because if you knew that, you're like, wow, that guy's a monster, but you don't know what his name is and you don't see him on, you know, so
bad.
that
Yeah,
shrinking of the industry, that the fact that however they expressed it, I mean, with the personalities you had in that Kaleidoscope group, and was enough to take down most people. It was like an Animal House, but it was like, you know, I mean, the fact that it didn't matter if they understood the music, they dug you guys. And they dug what you stood for, and that's what their label stood for, and that's what Norman Granz said too.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
You know, and that's what's missing too, is this understanding that I don't care if this album sells 2 records. It's what my label stands for. And that, you know, and maybe we were just a richer country, and maybe we were the only country in the world after World War II that had any money, and maybe we were going through maybe the last great civil rights movement, and maybe there was all these value shifts and
Yeah.
because now
all of the above.
yeah, because I mean Norman Granz would say, I don't care if this Oscar Peterson, Ray Brown, Ed Thigpen album sells two records. It's what my label stands for. And so many records I have, I look at them, I say, that dude at Epic was thinking the same thing. I mean, this is what I stand,
right.
you know? And so it's about integrity too, man. And talking to you only validates that more. So we just cooked here set 2 in the books, and they're 80 minutes. So can we hit again? Can we hit again?
Sure.
Maybe same time next week?
Yeah. If I don't have something going on, if there's something changes around, I'll let you know.
Listen. I'm going to do my best to remind you, but there's a lot of.
Do that. Yeah.
I'll remind you, but great hang, man. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Good.
Man.
It's really good. You know, and a lot of this stuff makes me define it, which is really good for me. You know, and
what do you mean by that?
It's really good for me to define stuff.
You mean pressure points in your career, or define the actual how it's
the process of putting stuff together, and how you accumulate a
legacy,
encyclopedia, musical encyclopedia in your head that will come out when it wants to, you know, piece by piece, and stuff like that. I mean, that's real for people to. There's some people who will explain stuff and the point does not get across, and then there's some kind of random explanation that you hear peripherally at the next table in a restaurant that nails it.
It nails it.
Yeah. And so any versions of trying to figure out what the fuck is going on in this dimension, you know, which is one of many. It all that stuff helps. I mean, we're supposed to, you know, figure stuff out, and so we won't fuck up so much. That's basically what it is. Figure stuff out so we won't fuck up so much.
Right, and I think one of the things about the Jake Feinberg show that is rewarding for cats like you is that I'm able to define some of that stuff, or through my questions, there's definition, and so
it's really good because without that you don't get the other thing.
It's all mush after that, Lindley. So, hey,
yeah, right.
Hey, man, great. Listen, man, have a beautiful day, man, and
have a good one too.
We'll do it again.
Talk to you
later.
Bye.
Peace. David Lindley, part 2 in the books. We'll be back in a little bit with Dave Bargeron on the Jake Feinberg Show live on Power Talk.